What is going on, everybody? Today we've got NFL Mock Draft 3.0 on the slate, and it is a fun one because we've made it to the NFL Scouting Combine, and this is my pre-Combine mock draft. I'm going to have another one that comes out within a few days after the Combine, and I'm excited to kind of compare the two to see where I ultimately keep my same opinions or where I choose to differ. The Combine's a great opportunity for guys to have their stocks rise up and down the board, but also to try to figure out where the league holds these guys, because we already know the media's draft stock on a lot of these players, but ultimately it's NFL decision makers who are making these selections come April, and I'm trying to decipher what the league thinks of these guys compared to the media. Today's mock draft is going to be 2 rounds, and it will include trades. My first mock draft with trades of the year, which I'm pretty excited about. We've got some pretty big deals in here in place. And again, keep in mind, this is a predictive mock draft, not necessarily what I would do if I was these teams. I'm going to have one of those closer to draft day, but this is a predictive try and guess what happens. And as we get through the Combine and ultimately through free agency, which starts within the next couple of weeks, we're really going to have a clearer picture of where these guys' draft stock stands and what teams are going to ultimately need. So without further ado, we're not going to waste any more time and get this show on the road. Before we get started, I want to point out that the picks that are highlighted in green, such as pick 6, those are the picks that have been traded, just so you have an idea of which picks have been on the move. And once we get to that pick, I will go over the compensation for that trade. But we'll start at number 1 with the Chicago Bears. There's been a lot of noise regarding what's going to happen with Justin Fields. I think it's been pretty obvious since the Bears clinched the number 1 pick. They're drafting Caleb Williams. No need to overthink it. They're going to trade Justin Fields. And it sounds like this is going to happen sooner than later. I'll say what I'm going to do for the Fields trade now, I guess. I have him going to Atlanta in exchange for the Falcons' 3rd round pick this year and then a 4th round selection in 2025. Keep in mind, Atlanta has 2 3rd rounders, at least for now. That may change based on what Jacksonville does with Calvin Ridley's deal. I've been really leaning on having Justin Fields go to the Steelers, but there's been a lot of rumblings about him going to Atlanta. So for right now, I'm going to plop him with the Falcons, and the Bears get Caleb Williams. With the 2nd pick, the Commanders get Drake Maye, quarterback out of North Carolina. I don't think this is as cut and dry as people think. Not so much that Drake Maye won't be the 2nd pick, because I think he will, but I've kind of begun to talk myself into the idea of New England moving up 1 spot from 3 to 2 to draft Maye. Washington moves back and gets Jayden Daniels. I think Washington's going to like the fit of Daniels in their offense a lot, and then likewise with Maye and New England. So that's something that I'm definitely going to be considering for my next mock draft, but for now, I'm going to keep it chalky. I'm going to keep Drake Maye at 2. If Washington stays at 2, I think this would be the correct pick. I think Drake Maye is comfortably a better prospect than Jayden Daniels, who I do have going at pick 3 to the New England Patriots. If New England stays at 3 and Williams and Maye are the first 2 quarterbacks off the board, the Patriots are going to have a dilemma. Do you go with Daniels or do you go elsewhere, whether that's a trade down or with somebody else, presumably Marvin Harrison Jr.? I would personally stay away from Daniels. I just don't think he's worth a top 3 pick. And yes, it's hard to get good quarterback play in this league, but I also don't want to waste draft capital when you can get a really nice trade package or a blue chip talent in Marvin Harrison Jr. to fix the receiving core. But I think New England is coming into this draft with the mindset that they want a quarterback. I bet they love to move up for Drake Maye, as I mentioned earlier. But in this scenario, I think they would take Daniels. That leaves Marvin Harrison here with the 4th pick to the Arizona Cardinals. Run this pick up to the podium. Not much else to say. I had the Chargers getting Malik Nabers with the 5th pick. There's a few different routes they could look at here, whether it's Joe Alt, Odunze, Brock Bowers, or again, a trade. I think Malik Nabers is too good of a player to pass on. And when you have the 5th pick in the draft and you have a lot of quarterbacks going off the board early, you want to get optimal value, even if it's not necessarily at a position of need, which isn't even really true at wide receiver. Mike Williams might be gone. Other than Keenan Allen, the receiving core for next year doesn't look great unless you get a leap out of Josh Palmer or Quentin Johnston. But regardless if it looks good or not, I think Malik Nabers should be the pick as he's the best player on the board. That brings us to the number 6 pick, and I had the Minnesota Vikings moving up 5 spots to get quarterback J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. In exchange, the Giants will get pick 11, pick 42, the Vikings' third-round pick in 2025, along with a future fifth-round selection from Cleveland in 2025 as well. So it's a lot to move up 5 spots, but I think it's worth it for the Vikings, who were aggressive in trying to trade up for Anthony Richardson last year and reportedly were willing to sell the house. So not only does that show me that they are aggressive in the idea of looking to move up for a quarterback, but they're willing to get someone who's a little bit more raw but has the physical tools and upside, such as J.J. McCarthy. There's a good shot that Kirk Cousins comes back. I think whether he does or doesn't, this scenario is absolutely in play for Minnesota. As for McCarthy in particular, his draft stock has really seemed to rise over the last month. It appears that NFL teams really like him. And we've been down this road before with athletic guys who weren't as polished in college. Look at Malik Willis. Look at Will Levis over the past couple of years. And those guys ended up going way later than we expected. So the question is, will that be the case with J.J. McCarthy or not? And I don't think it will. I think McCarthy is a lot more pro-ready, a lot more accurate than both of those guys were, not to mention he's a winner. Only 1 loss in his Michigan career, and if you date back to his high school career, only 3 losses, I believe, since he became the starter at IMG. And yes, QB wins is not always a stat you want to go with, especially with that loaded Michigan roster. But it also says something about a quarterback that he's a winner and makes winning plays. And I think the Vikings are going to like that, along with his long-term physical upside. Joe Alt here at 7 to the Titans. This feels like a pretty easy pick. There's a few routes they could go with, but their offensive line needs a lot of help. And Joe Alt, I think, is going to be a 10-year rock-solid starter at the next level. And then with the 8th pick, there's a number of guys I thought about here. In the past, I've had guys like Dallas Turner and Odunze here. I originally had Nate Wiggins penciled in for this pick, but I changed it at the last second for Byron Murphy II, the defensive tackle out of Texas. May not necessarily fill a major need for Atlanta, but again, I think you're looking for value, and I think teams are going to value Byron Murphy as high as the top 10. This is a disruptive force in the middle of the Texas defensive line. And I think interior pressure and interior defensive linemen becoming superstars is more and more important for defenses as we get through the modernized version of the NFL. Aaron Donald and Chris Jones are perfect examples, but also look at what guys like Quentin Williams, Dexter Lawrence, even Derek Brown have done for their teams. And if Atlanta can get their own version of that with Byron Murphy, I think that'd be a big win for them. Yes, corner is a need, but I think they like Clark Phillips, and that's certainly an area they could look at in free agency. And for now, I have Byron Murphy as the top defensive overall player off the board. If you can buy stock in Byron Murphy being the first defensive player in this draft, I would do it, because I imagine that number is going to be a lot more likely once we get after the combine. So the question here for Chicago with pick 9 is, do they get one of the top 3 receivers to fall to them? And in this scenario, they do. With Odunze out of Washington, again, pretty easy. Run the card up. Not much debate about it. Odunze, I feel like, could go as high as 4 or 5, and he could be in play for really anybody from Arizona until now. But ultimately, he ends up slipping, and the Bears take advantage. That brings us to the Jets here at pick 10, and this is interesting because all the talk is about offensive line. They need offensive line. They need to protect Aaron Rodgers, and obviously that's true. They need to invest up front, but I think they have an opportunity to do that in free agency, and without any clear top options on the offensive line, they could look in another direction. I know it'd be easy to point out Olu Fashanu here or even Taliese Fuaga, but I think the idea of adding Brock Bowers into that offense might be too much for the Jets to pass up, and I think Aaron Rodgers will be all aboard with this idea. Bowers is a ridiculous freak of an animal at tight end, and I think he's got a chance to be one of the best players at the position very early on into his NFL career, joining a young, talented skill position group that the Jets have been able to assemble. Jared Verse, the top edge rusher off the board here to the Giants. He gives them some inside and outside flexibility. Started the year off a little bit rough, but really played well down the stretch. And I think he could be a good fit in that defense after trading back earlier. Denver at 12, I have them picking Bo Nix, quarterback out of Oregon. So I have been saying since the start of the college football season that there's no way we have 5 quarterbacks in the first round. We're probably going to have 3, at most 4, and here I am biting the bullet. I think Sean Payton's going to fall in love with Bo Nix, and I think him and that offense would be a great fit. Denver may choose to move up for him a little bit, but given that he falls here at 12, I think Denver's going to make this move. Russell Wilson is gone. I think they would rather go in a different direction instead of looking for a veteran. Go for somebody younger, and I think Bo Nix working with Sean Payton is going to be a really fun duo. Nate Wiggins, the top corner off the board to the Raiders at pick 13. I think he's a guy who could really put on a show at the Combine, assuming he tests, which, as far as I'm aware, I think he's going to. The Raiders could use some more help in the back end, and Nate Wiggins gives them good size, length, and athleticism to do so. Fashanu at pick 14 to the Saints. This is interesting because they used a first-round pick on Trevor Penning 2 years ago. That selection has not worked out at all. And with the value here of Fashanu here at 14, I think they very well might go this route. Not to mention Ryan Ramczyk is still good, but he's not getting any younger. And the Saints are a team who historically over the last decade have invested high picks in the offensive line. And with Fashanu falling here, I think they're going to be interested in doing so again. Terrion Arnold to the Colts here at pick 15. Same pick as my last mock draft. Arnold is a superbly talented corner who's really gotten better throughout his career at Alabama. And again, the Colts could use some more talent in the back end. I like Juju Brents, who they drafted in the second round last year. They still have Kenny Moore in the nickel. Plug Terrion Arnold into that other spot, and that's a really nice corner trio for the next few seasons. And then another pick I had in my last mock, I'm going to repeat once again, is Jackson Powers-Johnson of the Seattle Seahawks. Whether you want him at center or guard, he's going to be able to do both at a high level, giving the Seahawks another mauler up front. I would guess he probably plays center at the next level, but again, he can play either spot on the offensive line. So far, we haven't had a ton of trades yet, and that's going to change right now. 3 separate trades within the next 8 picks, and that starts right away here at 17. The top 3 receivers are off the board. That's obviously the spot that Jacksonville's really looking to add. So they're going to move down and get a guy who they feel like they would have had in contention here at pick 17 and add some additional draft capital. The Jaguars are going to get picks 31, 63, and a future 4th from the 49ers, who will get 17 and pick 234 in the 7th round. And the Niners will select Talesi Fuaga, the offensive tackle out of Oregon State. I think he can play tackle and guard, but ideally slides right into right tackle. The Niners don't have many holes on their roster, but an area they could look to improve upon at is the offensive line. And it certainly doesn't help that Trent Williams is getting older. He's one of the oldest non-quarterbacks in the league at this point, and he's still one of the best. But they're going to have to think about replacing him eventually because he's not going to stick around forever. Another trade here at 18. The Dolphins are moving up 3 spots with the Bengals. Cincinnati will receive the 21st pick, a 3rd rounder in 2025, and the 239th pick in the 7th round, while the Dolphins get 18, 148 in round 5, and 196 in round 6. So not only do the Dolphins move up, but they add picks on day 3 this year, while the Bengals get an additional top 100 pick next year to move down a little bit and get the guy they would have gotten at 18, knowing that he's going to fall a few more spots. The player the Dolphins are trading up for is Dallas Turner, the edge rusher out of Alabama. He takes a little bit of a slip, and the Dolphins are going to take advantage. The Dolphins quietly need edge really bad. At the end of the year, they were rotating in some guys who did not look very good because of all the injuries they had. They're going to get Jalen Phillips back, hopefully, which is a big deal, but they're going to need somebody long-term across from him. They do have Bradley Chubb, who they gave the big extension to, but it never hurts to add more pass rushers, especially with Chubb and Phillips having pretty extensive injury history, and the value here at 18 with Dallas Turner makes a lot of sense. Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo goes to the Rams here at 19. I was torn between him and Latu, but ultimately I'm going to go for Mitchell. Corner's a big need for the Rams, and Quinion Mitchell is one of my favorite players in the draft. Phenomenal career. Yes, he played in the MAC, but he was a dominant cover corner for the Toledo Rockets, and he showed out at the Senior Bowl against Power 5 receivers who are going to be NFL draft picks, and he was phenomenal. I think he's going to be a great player at the next level, and I think he'd be a really good addition to the Rams defense. Speaking of Latu, I have him going here at 20 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are moving up 6 spots with the Steelers, who are going to get a really nice haul back. Obviously, they're going to get pick 26, along with the 89th pick in the 3rd round and the 127th pick in the 4th round, while the Bucs get 20 and 198 in round 6. So the Bucs move up for Latu. The Buccaneers are a team who historically has not been afraid to take risks throughout the draft, and it helped them get a lot of talent for their Super Bowl run. And they're going to do it again here with Latu, who obviously has the medical question marks. Those appear to be in the rearview mirror, but I imagine it's going to be in the back of teams' minds, and they're still going to be a little weary of it. But nonetheless, Latu is a superbly talented pass rusher. If he's healthy, especially early on, he is going to be a force at the next level. And the Buccaneers have some fun players up front to build around. At pick 21, the Bengals are getting Ja'Tavion Sanders, the tight end out of Texas. I don't think you guys have probably ever seen Ja'Tavion Sanders this high in a mock draft, so I have some explaining to do here. But I think he would be a super great addition to the Bengals offense. It's not a deep tight end class, and after Sanders, there's a big drop-off. And I think Sanders is a lot closer in talent to Brock Bowers than he is to the next group of tight ends. Sanders has been a really solid player over the last couple of years at Texas. A little inconsistent as a blocker, but he's got surefire hands, big play threat, and in the underneath area of the field, he can be a security blanket for Joe Burrow when he's unable to get shots down the field. T. Higgins might be gone, so this gives them another contested ball winner as well. And even if T. Higgins stays, it doesn't hurt to have more big guys catching the ball. At pick 22, I had the Eagles getting Kool-aid McKinstry, corner out of Alabama. Got to assume this pick is going to be either a corner or a tackle. I think that's the route the Eagles are going to go with. Knowing Howie Roseman, it's probably going to be one of the tackles, especially considering a lot of them have slipped. But I think Kool-aid McKinstry will be a really great addition to this defense. They're getting older in the secondary. Darius Slay and James Bradbury are two of the older starting corners in the league. Avonte Maddox as well is not getting any younger. So they're going to go back to the SEC well rather than Georgia this time, going with the Crimson Tide, picking Kool-aid McKinstry, a 3-year starter with the Tide. He's been a great player since stepping on campus, and I think he's going to be able to make an early impact in the NFL. At pick 23, we've got another deal. The Buffalo Bills are going to move up 5 spots from 28 to 23, and the Texans will, in addition, get the 99th pick in the 3rd round. The Bills are going to move up for Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU. Gets them another guy who can really stretch the field. With Gabe Davis likely out the door, they add another deep threat to the offense for Josh Allen to go downfield forwards. Brian Thomas Jr. was a big play threat at LSU. He was always the second option behind Malik Nabers, but I think he's got the upside to eventually become an alpha and ultimately replace Stephon Diggs as the number 1 wide receiver in Buffalo. And then at pick 24, I had the Cowboys going with Zach Frazier, the center out of West Virginia. This pick has Dallas going offensive line written all over it, and I think leading up to the draft, I will probably, for the most part, only give them offensive line. Zach Frazier is a guy who's been sneaking up boards. Another guy who I think can play center and guard. Multi-year starter with the Mountaineers, has the big wrestling background. And Dallas could use to add some more guys in the middle. Tyler Biadasz is a free agent this year, so this can end up being their replacement. This is the same team who used a first-round pick on Travis Frederick over a decade ago, and obviously that selection ended up working out really well. He was a multi-time All-Pro, and they're hoping that Zach Frazier will be able to be a fraction of what he was. Now to round out the first round, the Packers get Cooper DeJean, the versatile defensive back out of Iowa. This has been a pretty common pick for me because this is a guy who can play inside corner, outside corner, safety. And I think the Packers are going to be experimentative. Is that even a word? They're going to be creative with him and use him in a variety of different ways defensively. DeJean's a super unique talent, so I think they'll be able to find a way to make it work. At pick 26, the Steelers, who moved down earlier, get Edgerrin Cooper, linebacker out of Texas A&M. I'm all in on Edgerrin Cooper being a high possible first-round pick. I've had him go in the first round in all 3 of my mock drafts. I really see it. This is a guy who was fantastic this past year for A&M, and the Steelers are a team who have drafted linebacker highly. This is the same team who used a top 10 pick on Devin Bush a few years ago, and even though that didn't work out, I think Edgerrin Cooper could. I think he's going to have much more football character than Devin Bush, which really isn't that high of the bar. But I think he's going to be a fun fit in that defense, a guy who's got a variety of different skills as a cover player in the run game, even as a pass rusher off of blitzes occasionally. He can really do it all, and I'm super curious to see what his combine numbers are and if his stock ultimately goes up a little bit. Speaking of guys whose stocks I feel like are going to be raising as well, Chop Robinson seems to have talked his way back into the first-round conversation, even though the production was a little disappointing this year at Penn State. Only 3 sacks and 5 QB hits. Teams are going to like the athletic tools that he brings to the table, and I think he's going to be regarded as a big winner of the Combine and go back in the first round. The Cardinals need some more guys going after the quarterback, and he gives them a lot of upside there. ZhanNewton, the big defensive tackle out of Illinois, goes to the Texans. This is another pretty common fit of team and player that I've had. I think he'd be a really fun addition in the DeMeco Ryans defense. Newton's been fantastic over the last 2 years with Illinois, and I think he'd be a really strong pick, especially after trading down and adding another top 100 pick. The Lions at 29 go with J.C. Latham out of Alabama. This is an interesting pick because obviously we know the Lions need defense. Particularly corner is the biggest need on the roster. They could certainly use another edge rusher as well, but I have them going with the offensive line. Tackle is one of the strongest positions on the roster with Taylor Decker and Penix Sewell. Sewell's going to get his payday soon. Decker's not getting any younger. I believe he's 30 now, but he hasn't really lost much of a step. The plan with Latham would be to have him play probably right guard and just say, F you to the opposing defensive line and just build up a wall and a mountain for Jared Goff and these running backs. This team has valued the offensive line over the last few years, and it just fits the Dan Campbell kneecap mentality by having the most talented offensive line in the NFL. J.C. Latham is a versatile player who, again, has tackle guard flexibility. He can be a tackle long-term once Taylor Decker has run his course. But for now, he can start at guard and give the Lions the most complete five-man unit in the league. At pick 30, I had the Ravens getting Darius Robinson out of Missouri. I was listening to some of his Combine interviews today, and I'm really impressed with this kid. This is a guy who clearly loves the game of football, great football character, team captain at Missouri, and we obviously saw what he did at the Senior Bowl. He's only been playing football since around halfway through his high school career, but he's drastically improved every step of the way. Super versatile player, and the Ravens value versatility with their edge rushers. I think with his Senior Bowl, he has played his way into the first round, and I have a hard time thinking he makes it out of day one. Jacksonville at 31 gets Xavier Worthy, the receiver out of Texas. Worthy's a guy who's been talked about since his freshman year, where he burst onto the scene fast. His stock has kind of gone down a little bit since then, but over the past couple of months, I think it seems like people are really talking themselves into him as they watch him more, and I think he could go in the first round. There's a lot of really good bigger receivers in this class, and Worthy doesn't necessarily fit that bill. 6'1", 170, but this is a talented route runner, really solid separator, explosive with the ball in his hands. The hands need to improve a little bit. Catch rate is a little bit lower than some of these other guys. Contested catch rate is certainly lower, but I think if he will be able to improve those areas of his game, he's going to be really good. And then Troy Franklin going to the Chiefs. This feels like an easy fit of team and player. The Chiefs need somebody who can stretch the field vertically. And who else than Troy Franklin, who was a professional vertical threat in the Oregon offense. 3 Oregon Duck offensive players going here in the first round. I think this would be one of the best picks of the night for Kansas City. I've seen a number of people who aren't as high on Troy Franklin, but I think I would be willing to pick him in the first round, especially if I'm a team like Kansas City, who would be a slam dunk fit for him. Now we make it into round 2. We're going to start to move a little bit faster here. Carolina at 33. Got to imagine this is a wide receiver. That group needs help bad. Ladd McConkey, I think, has a super high floor. This is a guy who's going to be a pro immediately. Knows how to get open. Doesn't necessarily fit the white slot receiver stereotype. He can really win on the outside, and I think he'd be a great addition to this offense. I think he's a first-round caliber player, and Carolina would be very happy to get him early in the second. Tyler Guyton, tackle out of Oklahoma, goes to the Chargers, who are moving up 3 spots with New England. The Patriots will swap pick 182 in the 6th round for 106 in the 4th round. So New England moves down 3 spots, but they move up 2 rounds on day 3, while the Chargers get to secure Guyton. We're seeing a drop with these offensive tackles. Only 4 went in the first round, which I think is a lot less than people expect and a lot less than probably what will end up happening. But based on how the board played out, the tackles all kind of slipped because there's so many good ones, and teams recognize they can wait a little bit and get somebody really good here on day 2. Well, now here on day 2, everybody's going to be aggressive, and as you can see, these next 3 picks, tackle, tackle, tackle. the Eagles, seeing that the run on tackles is going to begin, is going to make sure they move up, doing business with the Arizona Cardinals, who will get both of the Eagles' second rounders at picks 50 and 54, along with the 170th pick in the 5th round and a future 7th from New Orleans. The Eagles will get this pick and the 90th pick in the 3rd round. So the Eagles are still going to have another top 100 pick coming in through the trade. They move back quite a bit from the 2nd to the 3rd round and give up some day 3 picks in order to move up 15 spots and select BYU tackle Kingsley Suamataia. This is somebody who's a little bit raw, an Oregon transfer. He's shown a ton of flashes over the last couple of years at BYU. But who better than Jeff Stoutland, the Eagles offensive line coach, to develop this kid into becoming a stud? I think this would be a home run fit for Suamataia, and I think the Eagles would love to possibly acquire him in the early 2nd. Troy Fashanu out of Washington goes to the Commanders. This is a really good player who I felt bad about leaving out of the 1st round, and I do think he ends up on day 1, but again, this is how the board played out. Washington's not going to complain, though. At 37, New England moves down for wide receiver Keon Coleman out of Florida State, getting their new quarterback, a big-bodied, athletic receiver. He loved stretching the field at LSU with Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr. Now he gets to do it with Keon Coleman, who was a little inconsistent this past year at Florida State, but I think his sophomore year at Michigan State really shows how he can be used as a versatile weapon at the next level. And I think the upside with him is obviously off the charts. A freaky athlete who's going to do all the testing at the combine, and I'm expecting some big results for him. The Titans are going to look at receiver here with A.D. Mitchell out of Texas. They've been heavily linked to T. Higgins. If they don't get him, they're going to look for the next best thing. Mitchell's a big-bodied, physical receiver, played in a lot of big games, dating back to his time at Georgia and then this past year at Texas. He's kind of what they're missing at wide receiver, and now they've got kind of an intriguing group of skill position players with Tajay Spears, Traylon Burks, Chigo Okonkwo, and now Mitchell. It's not a great group, and I think Mitchell probably has the highest ceiling of those guys, but I don't think that's an awful group to work with for Will Levis, who I feel like I'm a lot higher on than consensus moving forward. At pick 39, the Giants get Christian Mahogany, guard out of Boston College. He's missed some time, did not play at all in 2022, but Boston College knows how to develop tackles. Chris Lindstrom went in the 1st round. One of the, if not the best guards in the NFL right now. Zion Johnson went in the 1st round. He's been a serviceable starter with the Chargers, and now Mahogany is next up. It seems like the Giants are good with playing Evan Neal at tackle or guard. In this scenario, he would likely stay at tackle, and they're going to try it for one more year and add Mahogany at guard. And then at pick 40, Peyton Wilson out of NC State to the Commanders. Another guy with super high football character. Medical is a question mark, but if that proves to not be an issue, he's going to be a great addition to this locker room. And who else but Washington to add a guy who can really be a leader and a culture setter, because that's what they're looking to do with the Snyder family gone, new ownership, tearing everything down. They need new leaders and new guys to build the culture around, and somebody like Peyton Turner in the middle of that defense would make a ton of sense. He's getting some 1st-round buzz. I could absolutely see it, but here he falls early in the 2nd round, where Washington is able to scoop him up with the 2nd rounder they got from the Bears in the Montez Sweat trade. Here at pick 41, the Packers get Graham Barton, the tackle out of Duke. I don't think offensive tackle is that pressing of a need for Green Bay, even with David Bakhtiari probably gone. I think they like what they have with Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom, but I think they're really going to like the fit of Barton. This is a team who really values versatility on the offensive line. Zach Tom being a perfect example, because he can literally play everywhere on the line. And Graham Barton comes from a similar cloth. This is a guy who can play wherever you need him. And again, Green Bay is the team who really values that versatility. He can play tackle, he can play guard, he can even play center. And I think they're really going to like that. And the value is going to be too much to pass up for here early in the 2nd. Tyler Nubin, safety out of Minnesota to the Giants. He was getting some 1st-round buzz towards the end of the year, and I was all about it. I think this kid is superbly talented. In my opinion, he's the best safety in the draft. It seemed like his stock started to go down, but now there's more chatter of him, and I really wouldn't be surprised if I have him going in the 1st round in my next mock draft, but ultimately he slips a little bit. The Giants take advantage. They get themselves a great cover safety. Seems very unclear whether or not Xavier McKinney's back. If he's not, this is a home run. At 43, we've got another trade. The Jaguars moved down earlier. Now they're going to move up. They're going to be sending Atlanta the 48th pick, the 115th pick in the 4th round, and the Niners' 4th rounder next year. So Atlanta's getting 2 4s to move down only 5 spots. Jacksonville's going to go up and get Ennis Rakestraw, the corner out of Missouri. A lot of people see him as a first-round player, and I get it. This is a guy who, again, high football character, played through a big injury. I'm excited to see how he does in the combine, assuming he's testing, which, as far as I'm aware, I believe he is. I think Jacksonville's going to look to add some more talent in the secondary. They've got some talented guys at corner now, but Campbell had a slightly disappointing season. Darius Williams isn't getting any younger. You also have to pay Tyson Campbell as well. And Rakestraw is going to give them another guy to hopefully improve the corner room and potentially be a long-term starter. Jordan Morgan at 44 goes to the Raiders. The offensive tackles aren't abysmal, but it doesn't hurt to add more. And again, with the tackle slip, Jordan Morgan falls later than he should, and the Raiders take advantage. Jalen Polk out of Washington goes to the Saints. Michael Thomas, I don't think is going to be back next year. Rashid Shaheed, their big play threat, also might not be back. So there's not a whole lot to get excited about with that receiving core other than Chris Olave, and you got to give Derek Carr some more weapons. Polk was a great number 2, a great Robin to Odunze's Batman last year, and I think he's going to be a nice fit in New Orleans. The Colts get Austin Booker, the edge rusher out of Clemson. He's a very inexperienced player, but showed a ton of flashes last year, and the Colts are a team who have taken chances on project pass rushers in the past. Sometimes it's worked out, sometimes not so much. I think Austin Booker could be next up and would really fit the profile of player they like. TJ Tampa, corner out of Iowa State to the Giants. They're going to double down on helping the secondary. Of course, they drafted Deonte Banks in the 1st round last year, and now they've got a nice little nucleus in the back end with Banks, Tampa, Nubin, maybe Xavier McKinney if you bring him back. And then Jermaine Burton to the Falcons at 48. I'm really curious to see where Burton's stock is because for me, I feel like it's all over the place. This is a guy who is one of the most sure-handed receivers in the draft, most consistent receiver, and maybe the most consistent player on the Alabama offense, period, this year. There are some character question marks with him, but on the field, he's steady, he's reliable, and I think that's something that the Falcons offense is kind of missing right now with all the young talent that they currently have. Jonah Ellis off the board here at 49 to the Bengals. I think he's going to be a fun fit in that defensive line. Somebody who can play inside and out and could eventually be the long-term Trey Hendrickson replacement. Hendrickson's awesome. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the league, but he's not getting any younger, and Jonah Ellis can be groomed behind him, and if nothing else early on, he could be a solid rotational pass rusher. Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia goes to the Cardinals. They need some more talent on the outside at corner. Lassiter's a guy who I think is a really solid cover player, solid enough run defender as well. He's coming off a great season with the Dogs. And Jonathan Gannon comes from the Eagles. They love their Georgia players. So even though this isn't the Eagles, this might be the next best thing. Amarius Mims draft stock is another one that I'm very fascinated about. Super highly regarded recruit. He's played well whenever he's been on the field at Georgia. And he has all the physical tools to be really good. Thing is, he hasn't been on the field that often. And I think that could be a concern for some teams and could lead to him slipping a little bit if, especially, some of these medical concerns eventually end up being a long-term trend for him. The Rams are a team who have not been scared off by injury and whatnot in the past, and I think they're going to be tickled pink if he falls out of the top 50, which is a little bit unlikely. Again, more so how the board played out. The Rams, though, will certainly take advantage. Kyrie Jackson, corner out of Oregon, goes to the Steelers here at 52. Looks like they have a hit with Joey Porter Jr., who they drafted in the 2nd round last year. Now you get a long-term partner on the outside with Kyrie Jackson, who had a really good season with the Ducks, transfer a couple years ago, coming in from Ole Miss. And he's really improved in this defense with Dan Lanning, and I think he's played himself possibly into the first 2 rounds. Christian Haynes, guard out of UConn to the Miami Dolphins. They've had some promising development from guys like Austin Jackson recently, but they could still use some more guys up front, and Christian Haynes is a good player. I think he'd be a good fit. Chris Braswell, the edge rusher out of Alabama, to the Arizona Cardinals. They're going to double down on edge. They need bodies going after the quarterback. Again, with Jonathan Gannon coming from Philadelphia, they value pass rush. They value having a lot of them. So the Cardinals had Chop Robinson in the first round, Chris Braswell in the second round, along with Kamari Lassiter, who's going to be able to cover. I think this would be a really solid draft for the Cardinals, really improving the defensive side of the ball. Braden Fisk out of Florida State goes to the Browns. Big-time standout at the Senior Bowl. The Browns have really tried to improve the interior defensive line over the draft in recent years. It just hasn't really come to fruition. So they're going to take another hack at it with Fisk. And then at pick 56, Trey Benson, running back out of Florida State to the Cowboys. I think Benson does end up being the first running back off the board if I had to pick now. But there's like 6 or 7 guys you can make an argument for. For what it's worth, Texas running back Jonathan Brooks did get his ACL surgery performed by a Cowboys team doctor. I'm going to choose to believe that's a coincidence, especially considering Brooks played at Texas. But who knows? Maybe there could be something there. Nonetheless, I'm not sure if Tony Pollard comes back. Even if he does, Tony Pollard was at his best in a running back by committee system with Ezekiel Elliott. Tony Pollard, I feel like, is a really good complementary back. Not to say he can't be the lead runner for Dallas, but he's best when there's somebody else in the backfield getting a lot of touches with him. And I think a Trey Benson, Tony Pollard backfield, again, assuming Dallas brings him back, which is a huge if, would be a lot of fun. The Packers get Cam Hart, corner out of Notre Dame, Senior Bowl standout. The Packers are doubling down at corner. Cooper DeJean, again, can play either corner or safety, so they had the flexibility there, and they add Hart, who can play in the secondary. The Packers have really tried to build a strong corner room over the past couple of years, and obviously they have Jair Alexander at the top, but Eric Stokes hasn't really worked out. At safety, Darnell Savage hasn't either. Junior Colson, linebacker out of Michigan to the Buccaneers. Another guy who's gotten some first-round chatter. I think the Bucs are certainly going to look at linebacker. This is a position they have valued. Devin White's probably gone. Levante David's great, but he's not getting any younger. Speaking of Michigan players, Roman Wilson to the Houston Texans. Gets him a smaller, more agile receiver who I think can complement Nico Collins and Tank Dell really well in that offense, and they could have one of the best receiving trios in the league. Adisa Isaac out of Penn State to the Bills. I think they're going to look to add another body on the defensive line. There's a couple guys I thought about. Brandon Dorlus from Oregon I thought would have been a fun pick. Gives them a lot of versatility there. Marshawn Leland out of Western Michigan's in the same boat. Chris Jenkins from Michigan's a guy who I think is super talented. But I'm going to go with Isaac here, the complement to Chop Robinson for Penn State. Renardo Green, corner out of Florida State to the Lions. Detroit gets their corner. Green's a guy who I'm really high on. Had a really good week down at the Shrine Bowl. Not a lot of people were talking about him or the other Florida State corner, Jerry and Jones, but I think both of them are really good players who are going to go into the top 100. Green in particular, I think, goes a lot earlier than people think. Would not be shocked at all if he goes well before this pick. Maybe it's the Homer and me who would love to see the Lions get a steal here, and if Green falls on the board, I would be tickled pink with this selection. Bucky Irving, running back out of Oregon to the Baltimore Ravens, gets him a different type of player at the running back position. A little bit smaller, but still a tough physical runner who can make plays in the passing game. And the Ravens really tried with J.K. Dobbins, who's super talented, but the injuries were just too much. I still could see them signing a veteran, and I like what they've got with Keaton Mitchell. He's a fun player as well. But I think Bucky Irving's going to be a really good pro, and I think him in that Ravens offense would be sick. Kieran Amegadjie out of Yale to the Jaguars, another high-level performer down at the Shrine Bowl. This is a positionally flexible offensive lineman, can play tackle or guard, and the Jaguars get somebody else to block up front for Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne. And then Andrew Phillips, versatile corner out of Kentucky. This is somebody who can play inside and out. The Chiefs really value versatility at the cornerback position. Look at Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed. Both of those guys can play the slot at a high level. Both of them can play the outside at a high level. I think Phillips is kind of in that same mold. Whether or not they keep L'Jarius Sneed, I think adding another corner wouldn't be the worst idea. And Phillips is a guy who, again, hasn't been talked about a ton. Good week down at the Senior Bowl. I think teams are really going to start to like him a lot, and the media is going to catch on to this, and he's going to be a guy who's mocked more consistently in the first 2 rounds after the Combine. So that's going to wrap up the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you agree and disagree with down below in the comments. Again, there should be another mock draft up shortly after the Combine before free agency. Plenty more content here on this channel, whether it's mock drafts or more podcast episodes with Nickinator, and that should just about do it. So yeah, peace out.